Hey everyone, welcome to the latest episode of A Guide to Surrogacy, and today we are going to go through the ages to discover exactly where the idea of surrogacy has come from. Is it a new thing? No, is the answer. Just briefly, I will add, although I've been called one, I am not Professor Brian Cox, and I do not have a huge budget, but most of the pictures I will use in this little video are going to have been created by AI because I am slowly training that sucker to be a massive advocate of surrogacy. Let's begin, shall we? All back to the beginning of time. I have mentioned slightly ironically in the past about the OG surrogate, Mary, giving birth to Jesus and his two dads. Actually, the first recorded instance of surrogacy is way older than that. 2000 BC. This is according to the Bible. So this book, which has got a lot of people all heated up about the idea of surrogacy, the very first book in the Bible, the book of Genesis, has a story about a chap called Abraham. Now, his wife was unable to give him a child. His wife was Sarah. It was probably something to do with the fact that Sarah was in her 90s at the time. Yeah, the good book, full of those wonderful history lessons. So Sarah got her servant friend Hagar to have a baby on her behalf. Now this was, according to biblical scholars, around about 2000 BC. So over 4,000 years ago, this was the first recorded incident of a surrogacy arrangement. A true surrogacy, because a lady got another lady to have a baby, which she would then call her own, and went on to have two. Now, there's actually quite a few instances of what we could call surrogacy in most of the religious texts, actually. You go to the Hindu faith, for example. If you go back and look through that book, I'm not sure of the book's pronunciation. I shall put it there because I do not want to offend anyone. And speaking of not offending anyone, the queen in the book that we are referring to, Queen Kunti, had the power to invoke the gods to make herself pregnant. And she also had the ability to pass this gift on to other women and get them pregnant. The first case of a known egg donor, perhaps? Now, no matter your beliefs on religion, whether you're spiritual, whether it's just mythology, whether it's all just a bunch of baloney, whatever, these books and ancient texts were written many, 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 many years ago, millennia ago. And so the idea of people having children for other people have been around for a very long time. So now skip through the BC years, if you want to call it that, and we get to ancient Egypt. Now, in ancient Egypt time, the time of the pharaohs, if a pharaoh and his wife couldn't get pregnant, they called upon concubines, let's call them unofficial surrogates, shall we, to have a baby for them. Heirs and continuing the family line was politics in those days. And as much as that's what we can read from the hieroglyphics and the ancient texts, you have to put the human emotion back into it too. They would have wanted a family. It wouldn't just be about the historical passing on the lines. It wouldn't just be about the next generation. But the concubines were having children for pharaohs and their wives in some cases. Then we get back through history a little bit more. We get past Jesus and his two dads and we come into the AD years, zipping through these. And then we get to ancient Roman times, the time of the Romans. Now, Roman aristocrats, they also used concubines sometimes if they wanted to get pregnant and their wives were unable to. Or knowing those kinky people, they were probably in some same-sex relationships too, and the concubines helped them have a child and an heir. Later, these would have been formally legitimised in the history books and through legal processes at the time. A modern-day parental order. So the first parental orders if you can call them that. Ancient laws legitimizing heirs born through concubines in ancient Roman times. This is 10, 20, 30 AD. This is way, way, way back. I love this stuff. Now, over the years, the idea of a lady having a baby for someone else sort of drifts in and out of recorded history. And then we get to the 1500s in Britain, and there's a panic around the heir of King Henry VIII. Now, nothing is formally written down, but there are whispers, there are historical whispers from very smart people with educated guesses. And they say that when queens were not producing heirs, and not just for royalty, but through a lot of the noble families, other options were looked at. So King Henry VIII, after wife number was considering the idea of someone having a child on his behalf. Not the best example, I grant you, but the idea was used. Now, at this point, the idea of bloodlines of succession meant that surrogacy arrangements, although this was not a term being used yet, not until the 1970s, these arrangements were strictly secret, and it kind of started making everything a bit taboo. It couldn't be a risk of someone finding out that a child wasn't biologically bloodline. Surrogacy became more of a taboo subject around Middle Ages, certainly in the UK at least. Right the way through to Victorian times, things were kind of very much hush-hush, and any kind of arrangement like this was seen to be a bad thing. These all started forming some of the ideas of the early fairy tales. And the Brothers Grimm, for example, wrote the story of Rumpelstiltskin. He was spinning straw into gold, I think, if I remember that correctly. And he did this in order to have a woman's firstborn child. There was a contract and everything. I don't think it was as detailed as a surrogacy arrangement, but the idea of children being taken became kind of the public consciousness of what it might be to have this sort of arrangement. In the late 1800s, scientists developed the first artificial insemination. So for the first time in 1880, a lady became pregnant through artificial insemination and carried the baby through to being born. This happened in Philadelphia in America, and it sent shockwaves across the country, and when word eventually spread across the world. The very idea that ladies could have a baby and a man didn't have to be there at the time to do it kind of made men generally a little bit nervous. Whilst in public, people were scandalized by the very idea of it. Behind closed doors, childless couples were starting to see little glimmers of hope that maybe there was a solution for them on the way. Throughout the 1900s, people had other things to worry about really, but you come through to the 1960s, and Mr. James Bond himself, Ian Fleming, wrote a book called Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, and the famous villain, the child snatcher, who was working for some evil baron to steal kids and clear them from the village. He entered the public consciousness and was used as a villain to scare kids into doing what they were told. I mention him only because even today, a lot of the opponents to surrogacy, subconsciously I think, bring this character to mind, that people looking for a baby through surrogacy are somehow channeling this evil chap. And of course, they're not at all.
There are children here somewhere. I can smell them.
Now, artificial insemination trials have been carrying on. More successful attempts had taken place, but it didn't become a legitimate means of assisted reproduction until the 1970s. This was because it was too expensive, and they were just trying to work out how it all worked and refine it. But in 1976 in Michigan, America, The first legal surrogacy contract was made and the first baby was born using artificial insemination for another couple legally. And once again, the idea of other people coming in to help families was back in the headlines. Up until now, all of these arrangements had to be through the surrogate providing her own eggs. So what we would now refer to as straight or true surrogacy. And it wasn't until the 1980s with the invention, creation, discovery of IVF, in vitro fertilization. Now it meant that surrogates didn't need to be genetically connected to the child that they were giving birth to. It was a huge milestone event. It meant that ladies who were infertile, LGBT people, single people, could now have a baby through surrogacy. So the advent of IVF meant that host or gestational surrogacy, which is the type that Michael and I used, finally came into being, if you like. In 1986, it all went a bit pear-shaped. The Baby M trial hit the headlines in 1986 when a surrogate wanted the child that she gave birth to back from the intended parents. In this particular instance, it was a case of true surrogacy. So the baby had genetic connections to her. The dad and his wife were doctors. She had ME, I think, and couldn't have the baby herself. They fought for custody. It got big, it got messy. Ultimately, the laws, which were back and forth to appeal courts for years, became the framework that we have nowadays. So the surrogacy legal guidelines structure was born from this case in 1986. The Baby M case sparked international discussions and debates. There were talks on the legalities and the ethics. Ultimately, Baby M stayed with the intended parents, as was originally agreed. The idea of surrogacy, of a baby being born for another couple, very much used now as a storytelling device. People saw the potential in what could go wrong and what could go right through this process. And in the wake of the Baby M trial in the 1980s, author Margaret Atwood wrote her first Handmaid's Tale book. I think there's 3 in total. Fictional but frightening, it documented a dystopian future where forced surrogacy was commonplace. It was chilling, but it did remind us, it does continue to remind us, why ethics and autonomy and consent are all very important when it comes to any surrogacy arrangements. Far from being like that, it has taught people how things should not be. A far more joyous representation entered the public stream in the 1990s when Friends aired in their 5th series an episode where Phoebe gave birth to triplets on behalf of her brother and his wife.
So here you are. Well, I had the most fun with you guys. And I wish I could take you home and see you every day. Okay, I'll settle for being your favorite aunt. I know Alice's sister has a pool, but you lived in me. Okay, so we're cool. Yeah, we're gonna be great. Okay. Little high fives. Ah! Oh.
This was, I think, when the public realised, wait a minute, surrogacy could be bringing so much joy, and not just to the families who are now getting a child that couldn't in the past, but also to the ladies giving the baby to them, but also the ripples that would spread. Surrogacy was doing wonderful things for couples, but it was also doing wonderful things for their families and for their wider circles of friends. Today, surrogacy is very much a part of pop culture, used by celebrities and royals alike. It's still not accessible everywhere, and I think as public conscience is getting more positive towards the idea of surrogacy. Those that are against it are becoming backed into a corner, angry, and a little bit like wounded animals, and are lashing out. And unfortunately, in a few countries, these people are running government. You just have to look at some of the legal changes in the likes of Greece and Italy in recent years to see that those against surrogacy are getting louder. It's important for conversations like this to still be had, and for people to talk about it, and for people to experience the wonders of surrogacy for themselves, whether it be through families or extended families or friends. If you hadn't guessed, Karen is listening in. So what's next? Well, science fiction is closer to becoming science fact. Just this year, April 2025, in the UK, we had the first successful womb transplant. A lady wanted her sister to have a baby of her own, which is exactly what happened. It was the first case in the UK, but over the world, over the last decade, about 100 womb transplants have taken place. So this is very much happening in the here and now. What about the future? We have been tested at the moment artificial wombs. Lab-grown embryos are being grown from stem cells, which means that egg donors will soon not even necessarily be needed. It would mean that Michael and myself could have a child that was genetically both of ours, and it will go straight into the embryonic stage. Weird, crazy. Let's avoid the ethical questions of that just for this particular video. There are talks of a global surrogacy hub, which I think will be a terrific thing, and an international framework which would ensure women all over the world aren't being taken advantage of, and that undocumented surrogacy is no longer a thing, which is a good thing. Hell, there's even talk of robot-assisted embryo transfer, if you can believe it. From ancient myths to futuristic tech, the story of surrogacy is one of resilience, of family, and of determination to love despite any pre-existing limits. And let's face it, we could all do with a bit more love at the moment, couldn't we? And of course, surrogacy means that people like me get to have people like her. And what a wonderful, wonderful thing that is. Like, follow and subscribe. I'm sure this video might have introduced some extra comments. Have I missed a milestone potentially in the surrogacy journey? Put them down below. I'll see you next time. Have a good one. Bye.